check out what I've got for you on the bench today. This is the Walksnail Avatar GT2. It's a long-range video transmission system with 2 watts of output power. Now, the main use case for a powerful system like this is flying long range, because the more power you have, the farther you can go. And another huge advantage is penetration, because having more transmission power will help you maintain a flyable signal when there's a lot of interference, which gives you more confidence if you have to fly behind obstacles or in a congested environment. You can't get bind and fly drones with the GT2, so my test rig is this GEPRC Vapor D6. It's a great match for the GT2 because the frame has lots of space, it flies for up to 20 minutes with lithium-ion packs, and that means it's great for long range. I do have full reviews of the Vapor D6 and the Vapor D5 up on my channel, and either of those drones would work great with the GT2 because they're not very expensive. You can get them without a VTX, so your GT2 will just drop right in. Kind of. The GT2 is bigger and more powerful than a DJI O4 Pro, so you will need a fair amount of space, and it does require at least 11.1 volts, which means you need to wire it to a VBAT pad on your flight controller or directly to your battery. You can't just plug it into your flight controller like a DJI system. I did have a few hiccups installing my GT2 in this drone, which I'll go over later in the video. All right, you guys, now I'm out at the flying spot with my Avatar GT2 2-watt system installed on my GEPRC Vapor D6. This is a 6-inch quad, so it's great for range and endurance flights. Let's take it out for a test run. Get my goggles adjusted. I'm ready to go. Beautiful afternoon at a beautiful spot. I've got a lithium-ion pack on my GEPRC Vapor D6, which means we can fly for days. So here we go. Beautiful sunny afternoon up in the mountains. Let's go have a peek at those rock formations over there. Now, the nice thing about flying lithium-ion packs is you can go the distance, you can get the range, and you don't have to worry so much about flight times like you do with LiPo packs. Got a real sunny afternoon. I'm flying right into the sunlight right now. But so far, the camera looks pretty good. We've got a solid signal. We're coming up on 900 yards. Let's check out these rock formations. We just passed 1 kilometer. Our signal is completely solid. Look at that, absolutely beautiful.
Here's a look at the DVR footage from the GT2. Everything you see is straight out of the camera, recording 1080p at 60 frames per second. I want to show you guys how this system performs doing some long range, or at least medium range flying, but I need to do that without breaking any drone laws. My wife is spotting for me, so when we get to the edge of her ability to see the drone, we'll head back to make sure we're in compliance with drone laws. And for the record, I am not in the United States. Walksnail says you can get up to 25 kilometers of range with these stock antennas. Now, I can't fly nearly that far out in a YouTube video without getting into trouble, but from my tests, I can extrapolate that the GT2 can easily maintain a solid signal for several kilometers, as long as you have line of sight, but it does break up when you don't have clear line of sight. In this flight, I'm going to cruise up to the top of this waterfall, and as you can see, the signal is perfect. But as we come down and dip into this valley, I'm at the very edge of line of sight, and you can see how the signal really breaks up. It does maintain a flyable video feed, but if we were to go any lower, I'd probably lose my video. On the same day, I was also flying a Deep Space Rock 4 with a DJI O4 Pro in it, and the O4 Pro video signal was also degraded at the same spot. I know this isn't a scientific test, but I fly my DJI O4 Pro drones all the time at this spot, so I do have a good idea of how well they perform. And the Avatar GT2 holds its own against the DJI O4 Pro when it comes to range and penetration.
Here's what the Avatar GT2 will look like when it comes to you. In the box, we get 2 cables, one for a standard digital VTX harness with connectors on both ends, and the other is open-ended and has 6 wires instead of 4. Those extra 2 wires are there to connect to one of the GM gimbals. We get 2 long antennas with MMCX connectors. The tube is 90 millimeters and the cable is 140 millimeters, and they are left-hand circular polarized. The GT2 weighs just over 51 grams with the camera and camera cable. With the stock antennas, it weighs about 58 grams. By themselves, the antennas weigh about 6.5 grams. The original Avatar GT was about 42 grams with the antennas, so the GT2 is a lot heavier. Compared to the original Avatar GT, the GT2 is more efficient and it consumes 16 watts at full power compared to 24 watts on the original system. It now has dynamic power, which increases or decreases transmission power based on distance and link quality, which is much more efficient than just blasting 2 watts all the time, and it means longer flights and a cooler VTX. It also has frequency hopping, so if the system detects interference, it'll automatically switch to the cleanest channel available. It now has these much stronger MMCX connectors instead of those fragile UFL connectors on the original version, and the antennas are much longer on the GT2. The build quality is also much better. The aluminum case looks much stronger, and the fan is built into the case, which should be more durable. The fan is pretty loud. Here's what it sounds like when it's powered up. And it now has a USB-C port and a standard spring-loaded SD card slot. This connector is also a lot better. It now has a 6-pin port, and you can use one of the included wire harnesses to plug right into their GM gimbals or head tracking systems. The base latency is 22 milliseconds, and the range is rated at 20 kilometers with these stock antennas, which is technically the same as the GT1, but I think it's safe to assume that the new dynamic power management and frequency hopping features will give you a better experience and improve range and latency in a lot of use cases. The camera is the same Avatar Pro camera that came with the GT1. It uses a 1/1.8-inch Sony Starvis II sensor, and the DVR records 1080p, 60 frames per second. Like all Avatar systems, it outputs your OSD as a separate file, and you do have to take that extra step to merge them together if you want to see your OSD laid over your DVR footage like I've done here. I'll link to the program I used to do that in the video description. This is a big VTX. It's 34 millimeters wide, 36 millimeters long, and 23.5 millimeters tall. So this system is really meant for larger drones, as in 5-inch and above. Since most frames are made for the DJI O4 Pro, make sure to measure your frame before you buy this to make sure it'll fit. This VTX requires 11.1 to 25.2 volts, so you probably can't just plug it into your flight controller because most flight controllers were designed for DJI systems and they have 9-volt BECs. You'll probably want to solder to the VBAT pads if your flight controller has them, or directly to the battery lead if it doesn't. And if you wanted to run this on 8S, you have to use an external BEC because it's rated for up to 25.2 volts, which is exactly what a fully charged 6S pack is capable of providing. The GT2 has 20 by 20 and 25 by 25 millimeter mounting. The mounting holes in the case are pretty shallow and you don't have a lot of threads, which means you'll need to get the right length of screw depending on the thickness of your carbon. These antenna tubes are about the same width as the O4 Pro antennas, maybe just slightly thicker, so they should drop right into most mounts made for the DJI O4 Pro. The GEPRC Vapor frames use a carbon riser for the DJI O4 Pro, and that gives you better airflow, and it creates a space to mount your receiver and to route your GPS wire underneath. I tried to use the same system, but the GT2 is so tall that it didn't really fit. Technically there is space, but the battery strap would be pressed in between the top plate and the VTX and completely cover the fan, and I didn't like that. To gain a little bit of space, I had to reroute my GPS wire on top of the VTX, and I also had to move my receiver up front. You can see my Crossfire receiver installed right here. I actually didn't mind doing this because if you saw my original review of this quad, GEPRC used a mini 915 megahertz antenna back here because a full-size Immortal T would have hit the carbon in the arms. So I was happy to move my receiver up front anyway because I wanted my antenna installed in the front of the quad, which is where it should be on a long-range drone. And here's a look at my wire routing back here. I did throw a few loops in my antenna wires so they wouldn't get pinched by the top plate. The TPU is pressing on the antenna connectors, but it's not a problem. I can still twist them with my fingers, so it's more of a gentle embrace, and I actually like knowing that they're pressed in securely and they're not going to pop out during flight. If you're on the fence between the Avatar GT2 and the DJI O4 Pro, here's how they compare. The GT2 has higher output power. It's got 2 watts versus the 1200 milliwatts on the O4 Pro. The MMCX connectors are stronger and more robust than the UFL connectors on the DJI O4 Pro. But the biggest advantage is that it's cheaper and it's probably in stock and available to buy, where the DJI O4 Pro can be hard to find, which means higher markups from certain FPV stores. The advantage of the DJI O4 Pro is that it's lighter, at about 36 grams compared to about 58 grams for the GT2. It's also much smaller, so it's easier to install, and you could even install it in smaller drones like this Pavo 20 Pro, which you could never do with the GT2. The O4 Pro also consumes less power, at around 8 to 10 watts compared to the 16 watts of the GT2. And the minimum voltage is 7.4 volts compared to 11.1 volts, so it can plug right into most modern flight controllers, most of which have 9-volt BECs. And with that DJI magic, the range and penetration of the O4 Pro performs at least as good, if not better than the GT2, even though it's a smaller, lighter, and more power-efficient system. But the biggest difference between these two systems is in the recorded image quality. The DJI O4 Pro records up to 4K 120, and I usually record in 4K 60 using the 10-bit D-Log-M color profile, which can produce some very high quality results that's roughly the equivalent to a GoPro 10 or a GoPro 11. The footage I got from the GT2 is just okay. It's fine for sharing your flights with your friends, but if you want high quality cinematic FPV footage, you'll have to use an external camera.
Range and penetration, I don't complain about. I just miss having the onboard DVR that I have with my DJI O4 Pro systems. Check out that shot, that's pretty cool. See, as I'm hitting these mounted peaks and getting my sunlight just right, I can't help but think to myself, man, if I was flying DJI O4 Pro right now, I'd be recording some incredibly good footage. And these Avatar systems, yeah, they'll record pretty decent footage. It's good for memories, but it just doesn't hold a candle to DJI O4 Pro footage. It really doesn't. Look at that waterfall up there. Absolutely beautiful. What a time to fly. This is a great spot to be flying FPV, you guys.
All right, you guys, now it's time for my conclusions. And I think it's important to think about who is this big and powerful VTX actually for? Because if you want better image quality, there is the Walksnail Moonlight. And if you don't need 2 watts of output power, you could save weight and money by going with the Avatar Pro. The reason you would buy this system is that it's purpose-built for long-range flying. With 2 watts of output power, a super strong aluminum case, a built-in fan, and smart features like dynamic power and frequency hopping, you have the confidence to fly long range knowing that you can maintain a reliable signal over some very long distances. And that makes the Avatar GT2 a perfect match for larger aircraft like planes, wings, or FPV drones that are big enough to handle the weight and efficient enough to do some real long range flying. I got some amazing range out of this system, and my limitation wasn't the GT2 or my drone. I just can't fly any further in a YouTube video without breaking drone laws and getting in trouble. The bottom line is that if you want to fly long range and you need an alternative to DJI, the Walksnail Avatar GT2 is going to be worth a look. What do you guys think of this system? What would you install the GT2 into? Let me know in the comments. I love talking drones with you guys. All right, that'll do it for this one. I'll see you guys in the next video.